On Monday this week, President Donald Trump went to the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C., where he has recently fired the entire board and appointed himself as the new chairman. While skulking around that national cultural treasure on Monday, where he now personally intends to choose awardees. So get ready for a lot of Kid Rock and children's choirs who sing songs about the greatness of Donald Trump. While he was skulking around the halls of the Kennedy Center on Monday, President Trump on Monday announced, surprise, that the very next day he would be releasing all files related to the investigation of the assassination of President John F. Kennedy in 1963. All files on this subject with no redactions would be released the next day, on Tuesday. And so, because he said so, and what else is government other than just whatever Donald Trump says, because he said so, the National Archives on Tuesday, in fact, posted online over 60,000 pages of government documents on this subject. So he says it on Monday. They posted this stuff on Tuesday. Now, it's Friday Eve now, right? It's Thursday night. For all the conspiracy theories and drama that we as a country have built up around the JFK assassination in the past 60 plus years, ask yourself this. Over the last couple of days, have you heard anything in the news? Have you seen any big headlines about the amazing revelations in these documents? Have you seen news stories about how, wow, these new documents finally shed new light on the assassination, or that, some previously unknown fact about it has been revealed and this changes everything? Have you seen any news stories like that? No, you have not. And that is because the documents that genius Donald Trump insisted on Monday had to be released on Tuesday, those documents were almost entirely documents that had been previously released to the public under President Joe Biden when he released a bunch of them, under other presidents who had released other stuff. Almost all of this stuff had previously been released anyway. But this was a little different, right? Because Donald Trump, genius, insisted that the documents he was ordering to be released, these documents would have to be unredacted. He made that explicit in his order. Totally unredacted, nothing crossed out. And so, on his orders, they released all of these documents that had been previously released, except this time they had nothing crossed out, nothing redacted. And it turns out, you know what had been redacted the other times they had released these documents? You know what had been under those black boxes in previous releases of these same documents? You know what was under the Sharpie scratch-outs on all these pages? Turns out what had been redacted was the Social Security numbers and birth dates of tons and tons of random people who worked for the government around the time that the Kennedy assassination was being investigated. Ta-da! So that is what he has ordered released. That's the big revelation from Donald Trump. Headline: White House seeks to contain damage from personal data in Kennedy files. Headline: Social Security numbers and other private information unmasked in JFK files. These geniuses, these big brains. Among the people who Donald Trump has just doxed by publishing his full and unredacted Social Security number for no reason at all is his own lawyer, Joe diGenova, who worked for the Trump campaign and who represented Trump on some of the weirdest Russia and Ukraine stuff. In the Washington Post, quote, former Trump campaign lawyer Joseph diGenova, age 80, whose private information was included in the release, said, quote, it's absolutely outrageous. It's sloppy. Unprofessional. diGenova continued, quote, it's like a first grade elementary level rule of security to redact things like that. First time in my life I've ever knowingly agreed with Joseph diGenova. But that's just the start. The Washington Post further discovered that Donald Trump, in his infinite wisdom, has just published the full, accurate, and complete, quote, Social Security numbers, birthplaces, and birth dates of not just random people, including his own lawyer, but, quote, more than 100 staff members of the Senate Church Committee and more than 100 Social Security numbers of staff members of the House Select Committee on Assassinations, which investigated the killing of John F. Kennedy. Now, awkwardly for Trump in terms of what he has wrought here, and awkwardly for the rest of us because of the grammar involved, the Post also has to sort of gingerly note that many of these staff members of the Assassinations Committee are themselves still alive. Right? I mean, just because they were on the Assassinations Committee doesn't mean they're not still alive and kicking. And now Donald Trump has ordered all of them to be very thoroughly doxxed, which, among other things, appears to be quite illegal. Both the Washington Post and the New York Times spoke with experts who told them that this very well looks illegal. What Trump just did here appears to pretty bluntly violate U.S. privacy law. At least one person who had his or her Social Security number published by Trump has started discussing bringing a lawsuit against the government for having done this. Probably pretty good grounds to do that. It's also helpful to keep in mind who exactly we're talking about here, right? If these people were Senate staff members and House Select Committee staff members in the 1960s and 70s on committees that were doing intelligence investigations and the investigation of the Kennedy assassination and the investigation of the investigation, I mean, people doing that kind of work in government in the 60s and 70s, well, a lot of those people stayed in government or in public service, and that was one step in what turned into a very impressive career in public service, right? A lot of these people ended up later on in their life with very impressive, very important jobs. The people who Trump just doxed include this list. I mean, this is from the Washington Post again. Quote, many whose Social Security numbers were exposed had become high-ranking officials in Washington. They include a former Assistant Secretary of State, former U.S. Ambassador, researchers in the intelligence world, State Department workers, and prominent lawyers. The Post was first to report that this is what Trump did. The New York Times adds this tonight, quote, White House officials acknowledged today that it was only after the papers were made public that they began combing through them for exposed details. Only after they were made public. So Trump was bumbling around in the halls of the Kennedy Center, being a genius, when he announced, when he blurted out Monday, apparently with no planning anywhere else in the government, when he just blurted out that the Kennedy assassination records will be released tomorrow. Because he said it, and that's how the government works now, they then released the documents the next day, Tuesday, and then, quote, on Wednesday, the day after that, that's when the White House ordered that the pages be combed for exposed Social Security numbers, which, of course, had all already been published by the hundreds. Now, after that ready, fire, aim routine, they're now trying to fix it. The White House has now, quote, directed the Social Security Administration to issue new Social Security numbers to the affected people in an extraordinary response to mitigate the potential harm of the disclosures. They will also be offered free credit monitoring. So, yeah, good luck, ambassadors and assistant secretaries of state and high-end Washington lawyers, including some who worked for Trump. Good luck in your 70s and 80s, now working with the hugely diminished and unbelievably chaotic Social Security Administration to restart in your 70s and 80s everything in your official and financial life with your brand new Social Security number that Donald Trump is having to issue you today as an old person, as if you were a brand new baby. And he has to do that because Donald Trump just published your full name, your birthday, your place of birth, and your unredacted Social Security number on a government website because what? Who's going to tell him no? Who's going to tell him that's not a good idea? And that actually is the most amazing part of all of this, because it does not actually appear to have been a mistake. It's not like they didn't see it coming, and so they were surprised when it happened. Look at this from the Times reporting tonight. Quote, administration officials knew before the documents went out that releasing them without redactions would expose some personal information. They knew before the documents went out, but they did it anyway because he's the king. And what, you're going to tell him the genius brain fart he had about Kennedy while he was walking around the Kennedy Center is somehow not the world's greatest and well thought out idea? Who around him is going to be like, sir, It's not how the government works in an autocratic system, right? Asked about the debacle, the White House press secretary gave reporters this statement, quote, President Trump delivered on his promise of maximum transparency. Yeah, yes, he did. And the maximum transparency here is like if jeans came in clear and nobody had underwear anymore. Yes, it's maximum transparency. I'm not sure that's good. He definitely delivered. Yeah, and who were you or anyone else to question the inherent genius of every impulsive blurt of the 70-whatever-year-old God King who rules without restraint and without any checks and balances and without anyone anywhere near him who ever suggests the word no, let alone pronounces it? Geniuses.